Hello, everybody. I'm John Green, the interim president of the University of Akron, and also the director of the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics. The Institute takes a bipartisan approach to research and teaching about the political process. In particular, we place a special emphasis on understanding political parties and campaigns, grassroots activity, and ethical behavior. That's why we bring this program to you today. This November, Ohio voters will elect a new governor and decide between candidates for a U.S. Senate seat. To better inform you and other voters, we invited candidates from the two major political parties to sit down for a one-on-one interview with Tom Beres. Tom is a highly respected senior political correspondent, recently retired from WKYC TV in Cleveland. He's also a member of the Cleveland Press Club Hall of Fame. Instead of sound bites or debates, you'll hear each candidate engage in an in-depth discussion of the issues that are of real importance to Ohio voters. Thank you for your interest, and on behalf of the University of Akron and the Ray C. Bliss Institute of Applied Politics, please enjoy the discussion.
Greetings and welcome to another in our series of interviews with the major party candidates hoping to lead Ohio as governor and be one of its voices in the United States Senate. I'm Tom Beres, former longtime politics reporter for WKYC TV. And as you heard, the University of Akron's Bliss Institute of Politics is hosting and sponsoring our efforts. Well, today we are talking with Republican Senate candidate and fourth-term 16th District Congressman Jim Renacci. He is President Trump's hand-picked choice, seeking to unseat Democrat Sherrod Brown. Congressman, thanks very much for being here and sharing some time with us. I know you're on a busy schedule, but grateful you could come in.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, as we all know, not just Ohio, but people like their politicians comfortable and familiar to a great extent. Senator Sherrod Brown, I think, fits that category in Ohio. And so what has he done or not done that is so egregious and or so terrible that he warrants replacement?
Sure. So what has he done? That's a good question. Sherrod Brown's been in politics for 44 years. He graduated from college, went directly into politics, now has been in the House and the Senate for 25 years. I challenge anybody to come up with one thing that he has really done. What has he not done was plenty of things. Number one, he voted for the Affordable Care Act, which now is hurting Ohioans. He voted against the tax bill, which is helping Ohioans. He claims to be somebody who is for Ohio, but in the end, he's for Washington. If you look at his voting record, 97% of the time voting with his leadership, 96% of the time voting with Chuck Schumer, 94% of the time voting with Elizabeth Warren.
Well, he's a Democrat and he votes Democratic.
No, even worse. He's the fourth most liberal senator in Washington. And when you are the fourth most liberal senator in Washington, you do not represent Ohio values. Ohio's a purple state. It trends maybe even trending a little red. It's not the fourth most liberal state in the country.
Okay, and devil's advocate here for a moment. Okay, so Ohio, and making your point, only has one Democratic statewide office holder at the moment. That's him. So would it really be in the best political interest of the state, which still has a significant number of Democrats, though trending red, to not have a single Democratic voice speaking on their behalf?
Well, first off, if you want somebody who believes in the Democratic liberal side, what Sherrod Brown does, he's the fourth most liberal senator. That's not Ohio. So Ohio should have somebody who represents them. I'm the 18th most bipartisan member of Congress, if you go to my record. Sherrod Brown's on the extreme other side. He's one of the fourth most liberal senators in Washington. So wouldn't you rather have somebody that's going to represent you that represents actually Ohio, not somebody who represents Massachusetts or New York or California? There's the difference. People should be tired of that. And by the way, Tom, people are tired of career politicians. They're tired of people who've been there. If you're
making term limits part of your campaign.
Well, I believe the American people and Ohioans. And by the way, in 1997, there was an individual that came to the public and said, the biggest problem in Washington is people go there for 20 to 30 years. They start loving Washington more than representing the people of Ohio. And we need to eliminate that 20 to 30-year politician. That was Sherrod Brown in 1997.
You're running on a ticket with a man who has served 42 years in public office, Mr. DeWine. Does that apply to him too?
Well, look, I ran against the governor. I ran against Mike DeWine, and I said, so there's a lot of times people are in office too long. But again, people have to make that decision between two people Mike DeWine and Cordray, who have been in office too long. People are tired of this, and this is the chance. This is a chance we have to break that.
So many people thought that Josh Mandel would be sitting in your chair at the moment, running against Senator Brown again, and it didn't work out that way because he withdrew. And I guess President Trump came over and tapped you on the shoulder. Do you have any regrets about that happening?
No, look, I didn't run to be a congressman. You probably know that. In 2009, when my dealership was taken away from me, I was fed up with Washington. I was a career businessman who was fed up with Washington and decided to step up. If you went back 10 years, 15 years, and you talked to people and asked them, does Jim Renacci want to be a U.S. congressman? The answer would have been no. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, does Jim Renacci plan on being a United States Senator? The answer is no. But I do believe that our country is going in the wrong direction. In the past, I think the last 16 months we're going in the right direction.
So people say that to run for a political office like this, which is a grueling ordeal, let's be honest, right? That you have to have a fire in the belly for the job. Do you have that kind of passion for this job?
Well, I've been traveling all over absolutely, because my passion is for our children and grandchildren. My passion is for the Ohioans that have been left behind by Sherrod Brown for the last 44 years. My passion is my concern for our future. That's the difference. There's not a passion about being a U.S. Senator. If I could go down there and make a difference without having the title, I don't care. Titles aren't important to me. If you were in business with me for 30 years, you'd find out that I used to tell people titles shouldn't be important. Actions are important.
So, if one were to Google your name and look online at the recent news coverage, they'd see an awful lot of stories in the last week or so with fellow Republicans asking, what's he doing? When's he going to start going on TV? Is he tossed in the towel? Is he waving the white flag? I mean, what do you say to those are fellow Republicans who are questioning your strategy and what they see as sort of a stealth campaign?
Well, of course, they're not in the campaign, so they don't know what we're doing. I've only been in this 7 months. I haven't been in this 6 years like Sherrod Brown. I haven't raised $23 million from lobbyists. He's the #1 lobbyist.
But that would be an argument to be on TV more, wouldn't it?
Where's the money come from? Like I tell people, I've only been in there 7 months. Sherrod Brown's raised $23 million. Would I love to have been in this race for 6 years and had $23 million? The answer is we have a campaign that we know we have to run. It's based only on 7 months. We have the resources to win, and I'll challenge people.
Will you be on TV before the end of the campaign?
I'm not going to divulge my
top secret strategy.
I'm not going to divulge my campaign strategy, and we'll talk on November 7th.
You'd have to kill me if you told me. I know.
Could be.
Senator Brown's ads, who has been on TV quite a bit, have attempted to, in absence of your ads, define you. And just a quick rebuttal to some of those ads, okay? So an ad that depicts you as a businessman who's had an investment, still does have some interest in nursing homes, voting on bills that the way they characterize it would mean more expenses for nursing home owners and decline in quality of care for the residents that you support. What's your response to that voting in your self-interest? He's out for himself.
Well, the Dispatch has already come out and said it's false and misleading as well. The Dispatch has looked at that ad. I don't own nursing homes, haven't owned them since 2000. So again, it's false and misleading. If Sherrod
So
Brown,
you don't have any investments or interest at all in nursing homes as we speak?
Absolutely not. And that's what's amazing about these comments, because Sherrod Brown, if 44 years, you asked me this to starting out this interview. He's got $20 million. Why does he spend it talking about himself? What has he done? Put it up, write it. He should be able to write a book for $20 million on what he's done for himself. Instead, he's coming after me. That's because he's worried, and I understand that.
A question about what most people consider unfortunate baggage here, the episode involving Ben Suarez, Canton businessman who, the way dots get connected, called upon you to sort of intervene on his behalf, put in a good word with the governor, who would then try to intervene with the California authorities who were investigating him and kind of in hot water. And the way the dots get connected is you write the letter, and miraculously, shortly thereafter, $100,000 from his family members and employees winds up in your campaign war chest. Do you wish you hadn't written that or made that request to the governor?
Well, look, first off, that attack was made in 2012. It has been totally looked at by the FBI and everybody. It was false. And again, this is something that they
But the optics of it aren't good.
Well, optics, look, again, he's going to spend $21 million hooking up optics. I'd rather talk about issues, and that's where we need to go. I would expect him to do that. When you don't have 44 years of history or even 25 years of history in Washington, you go after the other guy. I don't have a political science degree. I have a political science mind now of after being in these campaigns. I won my first election against an incumbent Democrat. I won my second election against an incumbent Democrat. They used the same garbage and they lost because most people realize it's not true. And if you gotta throw stones at the other guy, then shame on you for doing that.
So do you believe the polls, another one out this morning showing him with a comfortable double-digit lead? Do you believe those polls are accurate? Do you have some internal numbers that would maybe suggest otherwise?
Well, what I would tell you is if the polls are so accurate, why is Sherrod Brown still spending so much money attacking me? Look, we have our internal polls. We know where that, but the only poll that really matters is on November 6th, and I think that's the key. People are tired of career politicians. They're tired of attack ads, and Sherrod Brown seems to not want to talk about his own record. That's the key.
So yourself and those who are supporting you have seen it as being appropriate to revive or resurrect some information about the unpleasant details of Sherrod Brown's divorce 21 years ago. Maybe my math is off, but that's been brought up in other campaigns, and voters apparently looked at it and said, and elected him anyway. Why resurrect it now?
Well, first off, I haven't, but it is a standard of conduct that the Democratic Party has set up. They said that if you have any sexual assault or domestic violence in your history, you shouldn't serve. Congressman Tim Ryan.
So you're letting the Democratic Party dictate what you do?
Well, if they're going to point the finger, they've got to look behind them at their own members. So I say, Congressman Tim Ryan came out and said, Arnie Parnell, a Democrat running in North Carolina, I believe, he needs to step down because of assault 40 years ago. They went, and that's assault, that Arnie Parnell has agreed to. Then you go to the Kavanaugh hearings. What a spectacle. Here are unsubstantiated claims, but they're saying because there was potential sexual assault, he should step down. Sherrod Brown's situation is affidavits. And by the way...
But his wife obviously is saying something much different now and supporting his ex-wife.
Is she recanted? Because that's the key. All she has said is it was a bad time in her life. You know what? There are a lot of bad times in people's lives, but she has not recanted those affidavits. And by the way, when I hear people know this story already, we have tested that. 90% of the people don't know this story. So I think the people of Ohio should get to know the story and make their decisions. But I don't think it should be hidden, especially when we're going after Kavanaugh in a Supreme Court hearing.
Okay, last question ripped from the headlines here. You've been flying around to some campaign stops on a plane owned by a businessman who owns what could politely be called gentlemen's clubs. What do you say to people whose eyebrows go up and say, well, that sounds kind of weird?
Well, first off, it's a volunteer who came to me this campaign, said he wanted to help me. It's a way of me traveling in a very inexpensive way. And again, other than the press finding out the story, we don't vet volunteers, and it's sad that the press has gone to the point of vetting volunteers. Now, I realize they got this from the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party pushed
I'm sure it was gift wrapped and dropped on the doorstep.
Exactly,
right?
And that's fine. Again, I don't vet volunteers. I appreciate volunteers, and the day we start going after volunteers is the day we have problems. But this is the age of the Democrats who have said, just like in Kavanaugh, we're going to go after unsubstantiated issues. We're going to go after a poor volunteer, a retired guy at the age of 65. We're going to go after him because we don't care. We're concerned and we're scared about Renacci. So let's dig this stuff up.
And just to clarify, I mean, you are paying for these trips. I mean, these aren't freebies, right?
I'm paying for the cost of the airplane. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so if you check online at congress.gov, it'll say that you have been associated with either introducing, sponsoring, or co-sponsoring almost 900 pieces of legislation. Did you know that?
I'm aware.
Yeah. So pick 2 or 3 out of bills which actually got to the finish line and became law, which you are proud of and you think have made a significant difference in bettering the quality of life of Ohioans.
Sure, well, I have a couple, and I will tell you the one that I'm most proud of was early on because I have a bipartisan working group that works together, and as I said earlier on, I'm one of the most, I think I'm the 18% most bipartisan member. So the first day I was there, I was in a hearing where Republicans and Democrats were fighting with each other, and I said, this is ridiculous. I came out publicly and said we should be working together. A Democrat, John Carney, came over to me. We started a breakfast. We started working together. And a lot of those bills have been bipartisan based.
So how many members do you actually have actively participating and doing something over beside coming over for bacon and eggs. How much actually gets done outside of pleasantries as a result of that breakfast club, if you will?
Well, there's a lot getting done. First off, my fiscal State of the Nation address was co-sponsored by all 24 members, all 12 Republicans and all 12 Democrats. That's a bill that I'm proud of, that I've been pushing, and may end up finally being a part of the budget process to fix the budget. The fiscal State of the Nation address requires the Comptroller General to come before the House and Senate and the American people and talk about our fiscal issues. That's a bill that I'm very proud of, that I'm going to continue to push even in the Senate. But the bills that I've gotten passed and been signed by the President on bipartisan, one was to take unemployment insurance and help train people early on. That was an early bill that was passed on bipartisan support and ended up being signed by the President. I also was a victim of identity theft. I worked across the aisle to get an identity theft bill passed, which now helps citizens who are affected by identity theft. These are the kind of bills that are very important. And the Tax Cut and Jobs bill, let's face it, when it first came out, it was not good for Ohio. I worked very hard to make sure that bill became something that was good for Ohio. I voted for it. Sherrod Brown voted against it.
So do you think Ohio and Ohioans are better off after 21 months of President Trump's leadership on policies?
As I travel the state of Ohio, they tell me there are Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I've had some eye-opening experiences traveling the state. I'd love to see Sherrod Brown travel the state as much as I have. He's spending money getting a message out. I'm actually traveling the state. And what I'm hearing are stories of people who are struggling because of the Affordable Care Act, who are now happy because of the Tax Cut and Jobs bill. These are things that I'm proud of that we're working on and we're going to continue to work on.
Hard to quantify, but again, if you're out there in the field campaigning, listening to Ohioans, there are two schools of thought. Well, the tax cuts have been a boon and put a little bit more money into a lot of workers' pockets, or the tax cuts have just been a huge gift to the very wealthy who are now pocketing more money, and to corporations who are spending most of that money to buy their stock back, and workers aren't seeing anything but chump change.
Well, look, 40 companies, in excess of 40 companies that have reinvested in their companies, reinvested in their employees with bonuses, and reinvested in their retirement plans. There's a list of those, and we can make that list public. There's also people like Mary and Medina who said to me, thank you for that extra money that I got, that now I can pay a little bit more toward fixing my car. Or John, that I met over in Youngstown, who said to me, thank you for that tax cut, because now I have a little bit more money to be able to fix a refrigerator that has been working. I mean, these aren't crumbs. The average Ohioan gets $2,000 a year back. Those aren't crumbs. Those are a lot. That's a lot of money.
Of course, the average, I think, is probably helped a little bit by the people at the high end who get much bigger amounts. Doing the average mean.
No. The average family of four with 2 children in the state of Ohio gets approximately $2,000 back. And they aren't on the high end. So let's make sure we stay with the
so we're doing apples and apples here. I mean, are you talking about everybody who lives in the state, or just looking at the category of working class, middle class?
The average family in Ohio, I think, gets $1,500 to $1,900 back, but the average family of 4 gets over $2,000 back. My district, I think, is $2,117 back.
Okay, very precise. So let's talk trade for a second here. What about the president's trade war, if you will, or significant tariffs with a number of countries? Do you think those are going to be more beneficial to Ohio farmers and Ohio workers and Ohio companies? Or flip side, do you think it'll be sort of a mixed bag, and there are going to be some, if not casualties, at least people who are maybe temporarily damaged or hurt by them?
Well, let's first talk about the trade war. The trade war was started by China, and we do have a trade war that China started, and we need to fix that. That's what I'm very proud to say this president's trying to do. At the same time, we have to be careful about Ohioans, because some of these tariffs are hurting our soybean producers. They are hurting our manufacturers. I was just down at the Honda plant the other day. They're very concerned about steel. I'm going to be up in Toledo tomorrow, another company that's being hurt by the steel tariffs. But in the end, this president is using tariffs to try and make sure we get better deals, and that's what I like about him. As a businessman, as I was for almost 30 years, I'm happy to see him using that tool to try and negotiate better deals. And by the way, we should be looking at all these trade deals. I'm 100% in agreement with it. Every deal should be analyzed on a regular basis.
So what is your opinion of the new, and perhaps most of us haven't had time to really dissect it, but the new rolled out, the sort of son of NAFTA arrangement with Mexico and Canada now? Is this something you could support?
What I've seen so far, there's a lot of good in there. There are some concerns I have that we're working through. I did get a chance to speak with Ambassador Lighthizer on it, on some of the issues that are concerning. But overall, it's a very good deal. It's going to be good for Ohio. And again, it's great to see that Canada came to the table.
So you're supportive of it tentatively then?
I'm supportive of what I've seen so far. Again, when I have a chance to, if I have a chance to vote on that this year, which I'm not sure we'll have in the House, but if I have a chance to vote on the House, it appears I would be supportive. And of course, if it gets to the Senate next year,
what do you believe is the most important index or the best way to measure the health of the economy? The stock market, the unemployment rate, or the take-home paychecks of the average worker family?
All of the above. I don't think you can take one. I think what you have today is we have economy growing. I think that's important. You have wage rates going up. I think that's important. You have unemployment coming down. Again, I think that's important. You have the stock market going up. I think that's important too. We have an economy that's growing, and here's the positive thing. We should continue to want that economy to grow under the policies of President Trump. We shouldn't want to go back to the policies of Chuck Schumer and, of course, Sherrod Brown, because he'd love to go back. I'm sure when you're sitting with him, he would love to go back to all those things. Well, they weren't working. 1.8% growth, wages not growing. These were all things under, President Obama's 8 years. What I call the lost decade. I lived the lost decade, so did you.
He'll be here in about a week and a half. We'll ask him.
Sure.
Okay. A number of major businesses, most recently Amazon, have gotten people's attention by announcing that they are raising the hourly wage for their workforce, going to $15 an hour. Should the federal minimum wage, which is now, I believe, $7.25 an hour, should that be increased at all? And should more companies do what these big firms that are stepping out and making a judgment call, giving significant pay hikes to their workers?
Well, look, I've said all along, federal minimum wage is ridiculous in this sense. You can't have one wage that fits all across the country. That's a state issue. Let's let the states deal with that. But having a federal mandate of a minimum wage.
But federal wage is kind of, is kind of a benchmark. It's sort of a cellar, the basement. So, I mean, should that or should that not be elevated some?
No, I think again this is a state issue. But you know what? You know the best way to raise wages? Do what happened in North Dakota and South Dakota. Grow the jobs, grow the opportunities. Go there, I think it's North Dakota or South Dakota, and I don't want to be held to which state, but go there. If you work at McDonald's, you get a bonus. You get a $500 bonus, and you get a very high wage that exceeds $15. You know why? The economy is booming. That's how you get wages up. That's the answer. Grow the economy, and wages will come up with it.
All right, so you're in favor of people getting a living wage but not having it government mandated?
I'm in favor of the government staying. Look, I got into politics because the government mandated taking my dealership away from me.
We'll talk about that in a sec, yeah.
53 employees, so I'm glad we're going to talk about that. That's the extreme when government gets involved.
Do you believe there should be some kind of a government mandated ceiling on executive pay relative to, the big corporations of fellows who are making money that's thousands of times what their ordinary average worker makes, maybe relative to revenues or profits, or again gauged to the average company employee's paycheck? Should there be any kind of lid on executive salaries?
Well, look, if you're going to take a lid on executive salaries, you got to start looking at NFL,
athletes,
NBA, all those things, because here you have a CEO who's in charge of 1 million employees or 500,000 employees, and he's making decisions that affect thousands and thousands of people. And we want to go after his pay, but we're not talking about the athlete that makes a tremendous amount of money that doesn't affect anybody's payroll. So we have to be very careful crossing that line. This is where government interference is so wrong, because there is no one size fits all. There is no one size fits all. The Affordable Care Act was a one size fits all, and it's imploding underneath.
So you, as you mentioned, decided to run for office because a car dealership that you owned wound up being, I guess, collateral damage in the government bailout of General Motors. Your dealership and others were kind of squeezed out by the terms of what eventually evolved there. So your business was definitely a victim, and there were some workers who lost their jobs. But on balance, looking in the rearview mirror, do you think the bailout was a wise move or not, given the relative healthy stature of the automakers that it helped and all the automakers who are still working 40 hours a week or more?
126 dealerships in the state of Ohio, 6,000 employees lost their job because of that bailout. You tell me whether that was the right thing to do. We now have a plant.
Well, I'm just trying. You have to weigh things. I mean,
we now have a General Motors plant who was bailed out over the Youngstown area, which is downsizing, and they received the benefit of those bailouts. So you tell me. I mean, again, this is the problem. The federal government bailed out General Motors, and now General Motors is moving their operations and their growth in their business over to Mexico.
So you believe in long term that will prove to be a bad policy decision?
Look, anytime the federal government gets involved in too many things, it becomes a bad thing. But I'm more worried about the 53 employees that lost their job in my location and the 6,000 Ohioans that lost their job. Let's not forget about them.
Would it be better for the United States economy to focus more on manufacturing or making things, or providing services and being more involved with high tech and just information and processing data?
All the above. All the above. You can't have a one type. Look, I was in the business world for 30 years. Bad businesses and bad governments concentrate on one thing. So we got to concentrate on all. We got to get manufacturing back. We got to get that growing. We got to have the incentives to make it happen. That's why I'm glad to see this president is looking at all our trade agreements, but also using the tariffs to make sure that we can produce things here. I think those are all important, but you can't just have one size fits all. Look, the federal government wants to do everything one size fits all. They want to have a health care for all, that $32 trillion is what it will cost, and Chair Brown supports that. We can't have that. We got to have competition. This is a country where we should allow competition. So in the end, we need more than just one thing. We need multiple manufacturing. We need service. We need a strong economy.
There's a big push in Cleveland now by a group of young, energetic, aspirational leaders trying to get the city well positioned to maybe be a part of the economy in something called blockchain technology, which is way above my level of understanding, but I guess it's heavily involved with cryptocurrency, and it has the potential to play a role in other major industries. Have you been briefed on that at all, and do you have any thoughts about the merits of Cleveland making an aggressive push where arguably it's probably still an underdog, but trying to seize a potential opportunity out there?
Look, I think all cities, I think all businesses, I think we need Ohio to be a place where companies want to come. I came here 35 years ago as a poor kid and started my first business with just a couple $100s. I grew that business from one business to over 60 businesses. That's the Ohio that I want to see. We've lost a little bit of that glitter, but that doesn't mean the shine isn't still underneath there. And we need to make that happen, whether it's in Cincinnati, whether it's in Columbus, whether it's in Cleveland. And I think all industries need to be looked at.
So, I mean, trying to pin you down a little bit, I mean, specifically, you think it's an idea that has some merit and should be pursued, or just a pie in the sky, wild, probably ain't going to happen, we should put our time and energy elsewhere?
Look, I've been on a campaign for the last 7 months. I haven't had time to really look into the details of this, but I do give any city and any company credit for trying to bring something to our state that brings that shine back out of where I saw it 35 years ago.
I'm giving you a lot of these either-or questions, which the answer is both, I understand. Well, here's another one. Are you more focused on finding ways to encourage alternative energy production in Ohio, there's water and wind, or are you more concerned with trying to revive the coal industry and develop natural gas to its utmost?
All the above, but I do think coal is an asset we have. Look, Sherrod Brown supported Barack Obama's push to bankrupt the coal industry. Shame on Sherrod Brown. He represents Ohio and he represents the coal industry. So I think we need to support the coal industry. I am a big supporter of the coal industry. My grandfather was a coal miner. That's the big difference. That's the difference between Sherrod Brown and me way too often. Sherrod Brown wears the parrot on his lapel. Maybe you'll see it when he's here. My grandfather went into the coal mine. He talks about the coal mine.
Canary, I believe, not to be a fuss budget.
Yeah, Canary, so there's two different people. My family lived it. This is the difference.
Do you find that at all ironic, where if you looked at the early histories of yourself and of Senator Brown and tried to fast forward who's going to be the Democrat and who's going to be the Republican, you might have guessed wrong?
Well, you're right. The difference is exactly that. I mean, my grandfather was a coal miner. My dad was a union treasurer on the railroad. My mother was a nurse. My uncles were steel workers. So I grew up in that union Democrat family. But as I've said a long time ago, the Democratic Party left me and left my family. And my father, who passed away 5 years ago, was a Democrat but wasn't voting Democrat anymore. My mother, who'll turn 93 this year, is a Democrat but doesn't vote Democrat anymore. She'll tell you the Democratic Party has left her. The difference is she just hasn't changed and registered. I did register after Reagan, and I believe in the policies now, because the Democrat, let's look at the Democrat policies. They're the ones who set the standard for sexual assault. They're the ones who also set the standards for, we have some of these, let's go out and get in their faces. Let's turn around and go after these Republicans. That's not our issues. Our problems aren't Republican problems and not Democrat problems, they're American problems. And to pay people to get in people who are in politics' faces, that's the Democrat way now. It's sad. I believe in the First Amendment. I do believe people should have the right to peaceful protest. But at the same time, I think people are fed up with what they saw in the Kavanaugh situation.
Talk about that in a moment. Also, one more in this category. So are you a believer in climate change? Too much attention being paid to change our policies for it, or not enough being done to protect a world in danger?
Look, I think in the end, we need to have clean water, we need to have clean air, and we need to do what's best to grow our economy at the same time. So we need to balance all those things and not have an unbalanced situation.
What are your thoughts about the ongoing Mueller investigation? The president has called it a witch hunt. Mr. Mueller obviously has, I don't recall the exact scorecard number, but a number of people have pled guilty to criminal offenses and offered to cooperate with him, albeit none of them overtly at the moment related to collusion. But I mean, what are your thoughts about the investigation? Should it keep going until he determines that there's no more there, or wrap it up and get it done with?
So look, he was brought on for collusion. He's been around for 16, 17 months now. We've had an FBI investigation. We've had a House investigation. We've had a Senate investigation. We had a CIA investigation. We now have all these investigations, and we're spending a tremendous amount of money. So the listeners who are watching this, they should start looking back and say, would you continue to spend money on something after 16 or 17 months that hasn't brought you a position yet? I think it's time to wrap it up. I'm supportive of it, but at the end, if you don't have any information, just like if you hired somebody, or if I hired somebody, or the people watching this hired somebody, if they hired somebody to find a leak in their pipe, and they can't find a leak in their pipe after 17 months, do you keep paying them? That's the issue I have. This is a tremendous amount of money being spent that's going to cost Ohioans a lot of money. It's time to wrap it up, unless he can come forward and say, hey, I think I found that leak, and now I want to, but so far, no collusion. He has found some other issues unrelated, but no collusion.
So should there be an absolute time limit on it? Should somebody step in and say, here's the finish line, whatever you got by then, that's as good as it gets?
Well, I think when you're dealing with money we don't have, we should be talking about how we can make sure that it's efficient and effective. You wouldn't hire anybody, the people watching this show wouldn't hire anybody with an unlimited stream of money just to keep looking and looking and looking. They would say, wrap up your investigation, we've given you plenty of time, and we've given you plenty of money. I think we got to start answering the question for the Ohioans who are watching this.
Do you believe it's advisable at some point, if things just keep rolling along with no end in sight, for the president to fire Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein or the special prosecutor?
I think Rosenstein, there's a lot of issues there that need to be looked at. I think he has done some things, if they are true. That
allegedly.
Allegedly, that's what I say, allegedly. I don't support just firing people on allegations. But I think if there is fact and finding of what he's done, he should be terminated. But I think in the end, that's going to be a decision of the president, not me as a U.S. Senator.
All right. Health care, all the polls show it's a top issue on the campaign trail. You're obviously not a fan of the Affordable Care Act, but have, I think, expressed some support for people with pre-existing conditions continuing to get coverage. Give me an overview summary of what part of Obamacare do you believe is, a la carte? What part do you want to save? What part do you want to get rid of?
Well, I voted on a bill that did that. Look, I think what we need to do is we need to protect those most in need, which I've said that all along, which are the elderly, the indigent, the disabled, and the children. That's the Medicaid side. I do believe we need to block grant that, because I think states have a better idea of where to spend the money. You shouldn't be dictating a one-size-fits-all from the federal government. But here's who I'm most concerned about. I'm most concerned about, Molly, who's told me about having to struggle trying to pay for these healthcare premiums and then having a $6,000 deductible. We have the middle income individuals who are struggling. My sister, who also is somebody who pays the premiums, gets a little subsidy, but can't afford the deductible. These are the people, these are working Americans that are being hurt. And the best example I can give you, and I wish I would have had a camera, I'm driving back from an event with a driver who turned around to me and says, Congressman, the Affordable Care Act, I'm making less than $50,000 a year. And he goes, and I'm being penalized. I'm being penalized because I can't afford the premiums. When are you guys going to fix that? I don't support it. I said, wow, I wish I had you on a camera, because there's another issue. The Affordable Care Act is not working for hardworking Americans. It is working for those that need to be protected. But I think we need to make sure that we're protecting pre-existing conditions. I've said that. In fact, I've signed a bill to that effect. I think we should make sure that we are protecting the elimination of caps. And I think we should also allow parents to keep their children on to age 26. That was a Republican idea. So those are the issues I've supported. But I've also passed bills. The difference between me and Sherrod Brown is I attempt to move the ball forward, even with things that aren't perfect, but knowing that we have to move the ball forward. He votes with Washington 97% of the time, and Chuck Schumer 96% of the time. I vote with Ohioans. I believe Ohioans should be first, not Washington.
So you are adhering very closely to most of President Trump's policies, but I hear in much of what you're talking about the need for compromise. I mean, how do you reconcile those? Because there doesn't seem to be a lot of compromise in the shadow of the president, but you seem to be, given your Breakfast Club and the other efforts to be bipartisan. I mean, how do you make a breakthrough of some sort so, again, compromise is not an obscene word?
Well, the best way to get compromise is to quit electing career politicians, because the only thing that career politicians do is they work to the next election, not the next generation. Look, you know me now for the last 8 years. I didn't go to Washington to be a politician for the rest of my life. I went there because of my car dealership. I have made decisions that have ruffled the Republicans. I've made decisions that have ruffled the Democrats, but in the end, I've made decisions that are good for Ohioans, and that's the difference. And if you look at my voting record, you'll see that I've done some things that are better for Ohio and are good for Ohio than just the party. I stood in the tax cuts and jobs bill, I stood in the Speaker's office and said, I'm not going to vote for this original bill. It's not good for Ohio. I got multiple calls from the Speaker of the House saying, we need you to support it. You're on the Ways and Means Committee. I go, remove me from the Ways and Means Committee if you want, but I am not going to support things that don't affect Ohio. That's the difference between me and Sherrod Brown. He loves Washington so much, and Chuck Schumer, that he's forgotten about the people back here in Ohio.
If you were to be elected, would you continue to support Mitch McConnell as majority leader?
I'd have to make that decision. I mean, there are some things that I definitely disagree with. I think we need to I think we need to get back to the 51 votes. I mean, look, people say the 60-vote threshold was done because it worked. It did work in the past. It doesn't work now. Let's do things that work. So I don't support that. I would look at the issues. I would look to see if anybody else is running. Those are the kind of things that I think are important. I don't make my decisions based on here's the party and I'm going to vote for that person. I want the most qualified individual in that position.
Hot button issue. Do you believe that it eventually, within the foreseeable future, will be necessary to either delay eligibility for or somehow reduce benefits for Social Security or Medicare to continue to sustain those very costly programs?
It's a great case. So the CBO director comes to the Budget Committee, and he's talking about our spending. And he's talking about how our spending is out of control, and I wish people would see that. And then when he got to me, I asked him, why is our spending out of control? I already knew the answer. I didn't think he would answer it. He said demographics. I said, great, demographics, because that's the problem. I said, tell me why. I already knew the answer, and here's what he said. 10,000 people are retiring a day since 2010, and we can't sustain these programs. So the answer is, career politicians like Sherrod Brown, they just want to continue to put their head in the sand. I want to be able to change it so it's around for the future. How do we do that? Let's look at all of the above. One of the things I've said all along is means testing. Look, there are billionaires, there are sports guys that are getting all these big pays. We talked about that earlier. And then they have the ability to collect Social Security. I was with somebody who was a multi-millionaire who just filed for Social Security. This is some of the things we should change. Look, it's an insurance program. They'll argue they paid into it. I agree. So did I. I paid into house insurance for a long time too, and my house hasn't burned down, and I haven't needed the insurance. Social Security is a supplemental insurance that we need to make sure is working for those that need it. I think there's a number of ways we can fix it. I think we need to look at all of the above. But at the same time, I think people like Sherrod Brown need to realize they can't keep sticking their head in the sand. They need to make sure we're working for that program to be around in the future.
You may want to challenge me on these numbers, perhaps, because I'm not recollecting, but I believe there have been recent surveys. You're the 16th wealthiest member of Congress with earnings somewhere, or holdings rather, somewhere in the $35 million vicinity. If it came to that, would you say, thanks, I don't need Social Security?
I've already said that.
Okay.
I've already said that. But remember, I was the poorest of poor. I challenged Sherrod Brown to look at our records where we started. You already touched on that. Sherrod Brown was the son of a doctor, went to Yale. I was the son of a railroad worker, had to work 3 jobs to go to Indiana University of Pennsylvania. 2 different lives, 2 different understandings. I came here with just a couple $100 in my bank account. I'm proud to say Ohio has given me the opportunity. I love Ohio because it gave me the opportunity to live the American dream. And I've said that I want to make sure that Ohio is that shining gem again.
So traditional Republican values are responsible spending and balancing a budget. Well, let's look at what's going on with the Republicans in charge of Washington in terms of the national debt and the deficit. How do you reconcile those?
Well, look at the same thing when Democrats were in charge. They were spending like drunken sailors, as the quote is used every once in a while. So the problem is, look at my voting record, though. I disagree with that. I think we need to make sure people are aware that we're spending money we don't have. That's why.
And this is happening on the Republican watch, right?
Well, it's happening on the Republican and Democrat watch because here's what's happening. You have 60-vote corridor in the Senate. So we can pass bills in the House, send it over to the Senate. I've said this all along. My greatest frustration is the House. That we've sent over 550 bills over to the Senate. And don't hold me to this because I'm not sure what the number is, but I think the Senate has taken up 50 of those. Shame on them. That's why we need to change the Senate. Too many career politicians over there who aren't willing to make a stand like Sherrod Brown because he loves Washington more than he really loves representing Ohio.
We can't get through this without discussing the whole ugly and unpleasant Kavanaugh situation in which the country took a beating. The Supreme Court got a black eye. I mean, everybody was a loser here. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It was a travesty. It shows why people should want to get rid of these people in Washington. It shows that we have people who would rather run for president than do what's right. I mean, it shows that we have people like the whole committee who had already agreed they were voting no, and that yet they decided to make this show. People like Sherrod Brown, who, we knew he was going to vote no from the beginning. He's voted 100% for President Obama's nominees to the federal bench, but he's voted 81% of the time for President Trump's agenda. That's the difference. That's the difference. It's politics over doing what's right, and that's what showed up in that hearing. It was a horrible situation. I do think Dr. Ford has a story, and I think there was something that happened there, but we have unsubstantiated claims against an individual, and shame on us for, and of course it was the Democrats who did that, but that's why I've told you earlier on, if you're going to go after somebody for unsubstantiated claims, you better turn around and look behind you at Keith Ellison in Minnesota, at Sherrod Brown and his claims. These are all issues. If the Democratic Party, they can't have the hypocrisy one way.
So was this the best possible outcome, given the ugliness in the script here? Was the confirmation the best possible outcome? I mean, there are some people who will say, I'm sympathetic, something happened to Dr. Ford, or we can't prove by criminal justice standards beyond a reasonable doubt. But some people are disturbed by, I guess, petulance, some would say, or just the anger and outrage and maybe getting a little combative with the committee members that, boy, that's really not a judicial temperament of cool, calm, and collected. And, some people are uncomfortable with the appointment because of that. What do you say to them?
Well, 57% Ohioans said that Judge Kavanaugh should be confirmed, and they would support a senator who supported that decision. That's where Sherrod Brown makes think about it. He voted no. He's going against 57% Ohioans. So in the end, here's what I think we have. We have an unsubstantiated claim, which is a problem. Dr. Ford does have some situation that must have occurred. But we can't have this standard of conduct again and not look back. And that's why, as I travel the state now, I've had Democrats say, I'm not voting for another Democrat. I hope that continues in the next 30 days. I've had independents that says, make sure I have your sign. I am not voting for another Democrat. And shame on the Democrats for going through this, but let's face it, here's what they did. This isn't an anti-Kavanaugh. This is an anti-Trump vote. This is what this was. This was an anti-Trump vote. Trump already, the president, had already listed all the people that he would put on the Supreme Court before he was elected. And then he was elected and he chose from that report.
So, broadly speaking, nationwide, do you think this midterm election is a referendum on President Trump?
I think if the election was today, it would be a referendum on Democrats going after Kavanaugh. The problem is, as you are well aware of covering politics, politics changes every 30 days. And we'll see what happens on November 6th, what the referendum is there. I hope it's a referendum on Sherrod Brown and what he hasn't done for the last 25 years in Congress.
Question about the Republican ticket in Ohio. By the way, do you consider yourself the top of the ticket or Mr. DeWine the top of the ticket? I mean, the hierarchy there, pecking order is what?
I don't know.
Well,
again,
okay.
I told you I'm not in politics enough to know that. I mean, at one point in time, somebody said I was on the top of the ticket, but then when you see most of the ballots, DeWine's on the top of the ticket. So, who cares? I think in the end, people just need to know the difference between myself and Sherrod Brown.
So, an observation to be made here: if you look at the Republican ticket, white man, white man, white man, white man, white man, top to bottom. To people who would say, boy, they're really not all that interested in diversity, you would say what?
Well, I would say, look, we need the most qualified people to run. We need more and more people to run. The biggest issue I see is why would people run after they saw what happened to Kavanaugh? Why would people run after they see what's... I have people come up to me, Tom, and saying, I can't believe you're even doing this. What they're doing to you. Sherrod Brown is just ripping you apart with lies and fabrications. And
how badly do you think this has damaged your reputation without getting into the merits of what he says or not? I mean, how much have you been hurt by this campaign?
Well, I think I have been hurt because I travel. I had somebody say to me the other day, an older gentleman said, I heard you don't like people with dementia. I said, where'd you get that at? He goes, well, I saw some ad. I go, look, I was in the nursing home business for 20 years. I supported dementia and I supported funding for dementia. These are the kind of things that are ridiculous. I wish we had a system. Here's the two systems I wish we had. You want to fix politics forever? First off, you put term limits in, and then you take money out.
Okay, but again, observing you're in your fourth term, so you'd be in violation of your own standard here if you were still in Congress.
No, because I decided to leave because I said, if I can't, look, when I ran, and I don't know if it was you, but many people ask me, are you running to be there forever? I said, I'm running to be there no more than 8 to 10 years. I've met my standard. And I said that was the most I would run. And now I said that I have a term limit, that if the people of Ohio elect me in the Senate, I'll be there no more than 2 terms.
What are your primary source of news on a daily basis? What papers do you read? What websites do you go to? What networks do you watch?
You know, it's funny. I get on the treadmill every day, if I can. I turn on MSNBC, Fox, and CNN. I flip through all 3. You know why? All 3 are reporting on the same thing, and all 3 are reporting different. So I want to hear all 3.
Like you're on a different planet with every one, right?
Exactly. So I want to hear all 3. I want to hear what they all have to say. Look, the reason I have the Democrat lunch, you said, what have you gotten done? I'll tell you what we've gotten done. I've been able to sit down with my colleagues on the Democrat side on a weekly basis and understand why they believe in something. I think that's important. I've also been here's what's so sad. If you look at my TV appearances, I've been on MSNBC, I've been on CNN, I've been on Fox, I've been on all 3. It's recently that MSNBC won't put me on and CNN won't get me on because, again, I think that's part of that.
Somebody told you we won't put you on, or they haven't called?
No, we've called and we've asked to get on, and we don't get on, even though we were getting on a regular basis during the.
Well, maybe the perception of looking at the polls, and I mean, I think a number of people have already said this is all over, but they're shouting, and you perhaps don't believe that.
Yeah, well, look, I can't wait till November 6th because in the end, I think they were saying in 16 about this time that Hillary Clinton was going to win by 8 points in Ohio, and it didn't happen. So polls are kind of interesting.
Tell me one unique or significant thing about Jim Renacci that the public at large doesn't know.
Well, I think the best thing I can tell you is that I'm a faithful family man. I've been married for 35 years. Actually, my anniversary was yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I met my wife when I was in 6th grade. We dated in high school. That's something I don't think people see. They also don't see that when I was living the American dream, I brought many people with me. They don't see that whether it's the unions or others, I love to go into areas where people may not like me because they don't know me. I'd rather that happen versus Sherrod Brown, who was going to do an event up in Toledo, who walked away from it because there was an outside group going to come and protest. I'd rather be there. That was reported by the Toledo Blade. I'd rather talk to people who disagree with me because I can learn. But at the same time, I'm a big believer, and I think that's the key. I've lived the American dream as a poor kid from Western Pennsylvania. You said this earlier. The life of Sherrod Brown and Jim Renacci are total opposites. I was that guy who could barely make ends meet. My dad lost his job when I was 8 years old. I had to do a paper route just to save money, make money. Those are the stories I hope people see.
So these questions have maybe become kind of a cliche for a walk-off question here, but tell me, in the spirit of bipartisanship, tell me one worthwhile, admirable, good thing that Senator Brown has done that you take your hat off to him and say, good job, Sherrod.
Well, Sherrod likes the Indians and supports the Indians. They lost yesterday, but that seems to be.
I think they were beyond anybody's help yesterday.
I mean, he's a big Indians fan. And by the way, I think he would tell you that over the last 7 years, he and I have crossed paths multiple times on the airplane, and we've had discussions that are very positive. But the truth of it is, I think in one discussion, I said to him, "You are so far different than me." And I think that's the difference. We're just total opposites. He loves Washington. He loves going down there. He loves the idea of voting with his party. I love the idea of going there, getting the job done, and getting on that plane and coming back, because that's what people in Ohio really want.
So President Trump is making an appearance here on your behalf Friday in Lebanon, Ohio, between Dayton and Cincinnati, correct? What are you hoping that will accomplish? What kind of energy are you hoping your campaign will experience because of his popularity and rally enthusiasm?
Well, look, I think President Trump's going to come here and talk about all the positive things that have occurred under his watch, and I'm very proud to be someone who's supported many of those things. I've disagreed on some, but in a large portion, I agree on the direction our country's going, and it's helping Ohio. He's coming here to talk about that. He's also coming here to support me and others. But look, the White House and he really supported me getting in. I think there was a commercial out there where President Trump back in February or March of this year said, "Renacci, we need you to get in, fight." I've done that. I've gotten in. I fought for 7 days a week. I'd love to have anybody go on my schedule, leaving at 7 in the morning and getting back at 11 at night, 7 days a week. It's almost an impossible schedule. The difference between...
You have to be bionic. I mean, I've covered candidates for all these years. I don't understand how or why they do it. Why maybe, but just the demanding nature of this.
Well, the difference is, though, Sherrod Brown has not done that. He's used $22 million to attack me. So he's running a campaign pretty much on the air. I'm running a campaign pretty much on the crossroads.
And to those people who maybe are pleased with the state of the economy but displeased with some of President Trump's personal comments and behavior, and I think an example of him, mimicking or mocking Dr. Ford in the last couple of days, how do you separate the two?
Well, I've said all along, I wouldn't say the same things that the president does, and I would not do many of the same things the president does, but it works for him, it wouldn't work for me. So I always tell people, let's go to his accomplishments. If you're happy with the growth that we have, 4.2% growth, if you're happy with wages coming up, if you're happy with the tax cut and jobs bill, if you're happy with unemployment being down, you should be happy with his policies, and we should vote for somebody who's going to support his policies going forward, not Sherrod Brown, who's going to vote to go backwards.
All right, Jim Renacci, we are talked out here, I think. Thank you very much for coming by. Grateful for your time. And,
thank you.
Appreciate it. Much obliged. Okay.
Thank you.
We've had a live studio audience here, and most of them are still awake, I hope. Okay. That concludes our conversation with Republican Senate candidate Jim Renacci. We will be talking with his opponent, Sherrod Brown, Friday morning, October 19th at 10:30, if memory serves me correctly. Our next interview in this series is Thursday at 3:30 in the afternoon with Democrat Richard Cordray vying to be our next governor. Thanks for watching. Remember, early voting starts tomorrow.